Hello everyone, today we will dive into the lore of the Death Guard Legion. But before that, please do not forget to like and subscribe, as the majority of the people watching this video are not subscribed. Now let's continue with the video. The Death Guard began as the 14th Legion of the Legends Astartes during the earliest years of the Great Crusade, in the era when the Emperor of Mankind sought to reunite the scattered worlds of humanity beneath the banner of terror. They were not born into glory. In their infancy, they were known as the Dusk Raiders, a legion drawn largely from the hardy techno-barbarian tribes of Terra's northern regions. Even before the coming of their Primarch, they possessed a reputation for stoic endurance and an almost fatalistic acceptance of hardship. Where other legions sought brilliance in maneuver or spectacle in annihilation, the Dusk Raiders became known for their relentless advance, their refusal to yield ground once taken, and their capacity to endure attritional warfare that would shatter lesser forces. They were methodical, dour, and implacable. In the earliest compliance campaigns, they were frequently deployed to war zones, characterized by rad-tainted wastelands, toxic atmospheres, and grinding siege conditions. Even then, the seeds of what they would become were present. Resilience elevated to doctrine, suffering transmuted into strength. As with all legions, their destiny was irrevocably tied to the rediscovery of their Primarch. Mortarion, as he would be named, was cast across the stars in infancy by the ruinous powers, landing upon the poisonous world of Barbarus. Barbarus was a planet perpetually wreathed in lethal fogs and dominated by towering mountain ranges whose peaks rose above the toxic miasma. In the lowlands dwelled oppressed human populations ruled by monstrous overlords, Xenos or warp-tainted warlords, who inhabited the high altitudes where the air was pure. Mortarion was discovered by one such overlord, a necromantic tyrant who raised him as a weapon and heir. The young Primarch grew amid decay and cruelty, mastering the art of survival in a world where the very atmosphere was a weapon. Yet even as he was groomed by his adoptive father, Mortarion felt kinship with the suffering humans below. He saw their misery and resolved to overthrow the overlords who preyed upon them. Mortarion's rebellion was defined not by brilliance or flamboyance, but by grim determination. He descended from the mountains and rallied the oppressed humans, forging them into an army hardened by shared adversity. They learned to fight in choking fog, to endure toxins that would kill others, and to wage war against enemies who relied upon fear and sorcery. Mortarion's methods were direct and unadorned. He favored scythes and heavy blades, weapons suited to cleaving through armored monstrosities at close quarters. One by one, the overlords of Barbarus fell. Yet when Mortarion finally confronted his adoptive father in the highest mountain fortress, he faltered. The air at such altitude was lethally toxic to humans, and even Mortarion's transhuman physiology could not endure it indefinitely. As he suffocated, the Emperor of Mankind appeared, offering aid. The Emperor slew the Overlord with psychic might, saving Mortarion but robbing him of the final victory. Though Mortarion swore fealty to the Emperor and accepted command of his legion, a seed of resentment took root. He had been denied the right to triumph by his own strength. When Mortarion was reunited with the 14th Legion, he found warriors who already mirrored aspects of his own temperament. He reshaped them in the image of Barbarus. The Dusk Raiders were renamed the Death Guard, a title reflecting both their role as guardians against extinction and their grim familiarity with mortality. Mortarion imposed a culture of grim austerity. Rank distinctions were minimized. Ornate heraldry and ostentatious displays were discouraged. Instead, emphasis was placed upon brotherhood, equality in suffering, and the shared burden of warfare. The Death Guard adopted heavy, durable war gear suited for protracted engagements. Tactical doctrines centered on inexorable advance, close-range firefights, and the grinding erosion of enemy capacity. They became masters of chemical and biological warfare, not out of cruelty for its own sake, but because such methods aligned with Mortarion's upbringing in a toxic world. To the Death Guard, poison was not dishonorable. It was a weapon like any other, and endurance against it was proof of strength. Throughout the Great Crusade, the Death Guard earned a reputation as a legion capable of conquering worlds that others found untenable. They excelled in compliance actions involving industrial hellscapes, plague-ridden hive cities, and fortress worlds requiring siege and attrition. Where swift victory was impossible, the Death Guard advanced step by step, absorbing punishment and returning it with calculated inevitability. Mortarion's disdain for psychers became a defining feature. Having grown up under the rule of sorcerous overlords and having witnessed the Emperor's psychic intervention on Barbarus, he developed a deep mistrust of witchcraft. Within his legion, librarians were discouraged and eventually marginalized. Mortarion viewed psychic power as a crutch and a corruption. Strength, to him, lay in physical endurance and unwavering resolve. The Death Guard's relationships with other legions were complex. They shared a certain kinship with the Iron Warriors and the Imperial Fists in their appreciation for siegecraft and attritional warfare. Yet Mortarion's brooding disposition and ideological rigidity often set him at odds with his brothers. He held particular disdain for the Thousand Sons, whose overt reliance on sorcery he saw as an abomination. The seeds of division within the Imperium were sown long before the Horus Heresy erupted. Mortarion's loyalty to the Emperor was never as fervent as that of some of his brothers. His allegiance was born of obligation rather than love. During the Horus Heresy, the Death Guard became instruments of devastation across countless battlefields. They fought in the Istvan III atrocity, where loyalist elements within traitor legions were purged. The virus bombing of Istvan III foreshadowed the legion's future association with pestilence, though at that stage it was a calculated act of extermination rather than devotion to chaos. The Death Guard later participated in the drop site massacre on Istvan V, contributing to the annihilation of loyalist forces. Throughout the heresy, their methods remained consistent: relentless advance, close-quarters brutality, and the calculated use of chemical agents. As the traitor legions made their way toward Terra, the Death Guard's fate took a catastrophic turn. During the voyage through the warp, their fleet became ensnared by unnatural storms. The navigator routes failed, and the ships were trapped in the immaterium. Within the claustrophobic hulls of their vessels, a supernatural contagion began to spread. It was no ordinary disease, but a warp-spawned plague engineered by the chaos god Nurgle, the Lord of Decay. The sickness defied all remedies. Astartes' physiology, normally immune to disease, proved helpless. Flesh rotted on living bodies, organs liquefied. Warriors who had prided themselves on endurance now faced agony beyond comprehension. Death did not come as release. The afflicted lingered in torment. Mortarion, witnessing the suffering of his sons and powerless to save them, faced a choice. In his despair, he was approached by Nurgle, who offered salvation, not in the form of cure, but in transformation. Acceptance of Nurgle's gifts would end the pain and grant resilience beyond anything the Legion had known. Mortarion, who had always defined strength as endurance, finally broke. To spare his Legion further agony, he consented. In that moment, the Death Guard were reborn as Plague Marines. Their rotting flesh stabilized into grotesque forms sustained by warp energy. Pain was replaced by numb acceptance. Where once they had endured toxins through fortitude, they now embodied corruption itself. Transformed, the Death Guard resumed their campaign, eventually participating in the Siege of Terra. They assaulted the walls of the Imperial Palace, their plague-ridden forms spreading contagion among defenders. Yet despite their newfound resilience, the traitors were ultimately defeated. With Horus slain by the Emperor and the rebellion shattered, the Death Guard retreated into the Eye of Terror. There, in the demon world known as the Plague Planet, Mortarion established his dominion. The Legion fractured into Vectoriums, semi-autonomous warbands united by devotion to Nurgle and allegiance to their Primarch. In the millennia that followed, the Death Guard evolved further. Their armor fused with their mutated flesh. Rusted ceramite became indistinguishable from diseased tissue. They became living incubators for contagions, their very presence warping environments into pestilential wastelands. Yet unlike the frenzied World Eaters or the hedonistic Emperor's children, the Death Guard retained a grim, methodical character. They waged war as they always had, slowly, inexorably, grinding down opposition. To them, decay was not chaos but inevitability. Nurgle's creed taught that all things rot, all empires crumble, and in that entropy there is a perverse form of constancy. Mortarion himself ascended to demonhood, becoming a demon primarch of Nurgle. His transformation amplified his bitterness. He came to embody pestilence on a galactic scale, wielding a scythe of immense power and commanding demonic legions alongside his plague marines. His hatred of the Emperor endured, but it was now intertwined with devotion to the plague god. In the 41st millennium, Mortarion emerged from the Eye of Terror during the era of the Dark Imperium, leading vast campaigns of contagion against the Imperium he once served. The Death Guard's campaigns in the modern era are characterized by biological warfare on a planetary scale. They unleash engineered plagues capable of reducing hive cities to charnel pits. Their fleets carry contagions tailored to specific genetic profiles, rendering entire populations vulnerable. Yet for all their corruption, they retain strategic coherence. They establish beachheads, fortify them with demon engines and plague artillery, and advance under cover of miasmic storms. Resistance is met not only with bolter fire, but with the slow suffocation of ecosystems. The return of Robout Guilliman and the Indomitus Crusade brought the Death Guard into renewed conflict with the Imperium's revitalized forces. In the Plague Wars of Ultramar, Mortarion personally confronted Guilliman. The clash between the Demon Primarch and the resurrected Lord Commander symbolized the enduring schism of the heresy. Though Mortarion inflicted grievous harm, Guilliman survived, aided by the Emperor's lingering power. The conflict demonstrated that the Death Guard, though ancient and corrupted, remained a central threat in the galaxy's ongoing wars. In their current state, the Death Guard are both diminished and empowered. Diminished in the sense that they are forever bound to Nurgle's will, their autonomy constrained by demonic patronage. Empowered in that they are virtually immune to fear, pain, and despair. They do not seek swift conquest or glory. They seek entropy. Worlds claimed by the Death Guard do not burn brightly. They wither. Forests become fungal swamps. Oceans turn septic. Survivors either succumb or are twisted into plague thralls. Yet beneath layers of corruption, traces of the old Legion remain. Their organizational structure retains echoes of the Great Crusade. Their discipline, though warped, persists. They maintain arsenals, manufactoria, and fleets with grim diligence. To an external observer, they are monstrous caricatures of space marines. To themselves, they are perfected forms, liberated from the illusion of purity, aligned with the fundamental truth of decay. Thus, the arc of the Death Guard stretches from the toxic slopes of Barbarus to the diseased battlefields of the 41st millennium. They began as warriors who endured poison through sheer will. They became beings who embody poison as a sacrament. Their history is one of resentment, endurance, betrayal, and transformation. In a galaxy defined by endless war, they are the patient hand of entropy, advancing step by step, certain that in time all things will fall.